Alright people, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification. That way you'll know when I upload the next video and you'll be supporting my channel. Follow me on Twitter. Every time I upload a new video, I'll be tweeting. Ladies and gents, and this is History Summarized, Minoan Greece by the channel Oli Sarcastic Production. The classical Greeks were the first kids on the Aegean block, long before Athens' golden age, before Homer, and even before the Trojan Wars. There was a civilization on the island of Crete. The land of King Minos was home to beautiful palaces, a fascinating complex economy, and something approximately Bull Cthulhu. Okay. It's a fun time, let's jump in. Okay. So yeah, in earlier times, like Mycenaean and Minoans were the, I guess pretty early civilizations, right? Mycenaean being in the mainland Greece, they were in Minoans were on the Crete. Mycenaean being the first one to ever spoke the Greek language, if I remember correctly. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. I haven't reacted to one history summarized from OSP for a long time, so yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Let's watch it. Remember people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe so I know which type of videos to react to more. Check out other reactions I did, there's a link in the description. Check out the cards, check out the ink cards, and yeah, let's watch it.
Nothing stirs the imagination like an honest-to-goodness mystery. There's just something enthralling about the unknown that ranges from the exciting to the abominably eldritch and incomprehensibly terrifying. Now, our old pals the classical Greeks were no stranger to figuring stuff out, what with all their spiffy philosophy, but there were some things that even they got a little stumped by. Where did our myths come from? Who came before us? Why does that island look like an impact crater? Should we be scared? Well, all these tempting plot threads are wrapped up in the murky history of a pre-Greek civilization called the Minoans. I should specify, not called that by themselves, or even by the Greeks, because this society was so obscure that we only discovered it in 1900. More than just a stepping stone on the road to Greece making it big, the Minoans are a fascinating part of Bronze Age history.
Yeah, I think, Greeks didn't know about Minoans, because when the, basically, barbarians or whatever, just a barbarian horde came and took over places, and then slowly became the newer, Greeks, I guess, and then they start to adopt the Minoan culture, and they just thought that they came up with it, right? They had no idea there was a civilization before them that they took it from.
Because they're so darn weird. So, to trace the origins of civilization in the Aegean Sea, let's do some history. It might not come as a surprise to hear that Greece and boats have a long history together, but it turns out that seafaring in Greece is even older than civilization in Greece, as excavations from the Frankthi caves on the mainlands turned up obsidian ferried over from volcanoes on the islands as far back as the Mesolithic era. And those handy-dandy boats helped them make an early transition from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, as the process involved combining copper, found in the island of Delos, with tin, found in the northeast Aegean coast. A route that is unfortunately a little too damp for a walking tour. Between that sweet...
Yeah, but aren't these all the people eventually can trace themselves back to Phoenicians who came over here on boats or something?
Boat access enabling a thriving fishing community and a local agriculture precision optimized for grapes and olives, the Cycladic Islands were looking pretty idyllic for early civilization. I mean, heck, bright sunny islands with seafood, olive oil, and wine, Bronze Age suddenly not sounding too bad. The Aegean Sea will continue being a solid 10 for the next 5,000 years, but after a millennium...
Let's be honest, after 100 years of global warming, Bronze Age and all other age would sound really good.
Of bronze making, the cultural center of gravity shifted south to the island of Crete. We can see this quite clearly in the archaeological record because the Cretans had a distinct hobby of building massive palaces. Out of the half-dozen spread across the island, the largest and most famous of these is Knossos, home of the legendary King Minos, hence the name Minoan. It was first excavated in the 1900s by Sir Arthur Evans, who stumbled onto some unusually ancient-looking pottery, got curious, bought up a bunch of land, grabbed a shovel, and got to work. Within 5 years, he and his team uncovered a sprawling building complex made of smooth quarried stone with such amenities as skylights, running water, buried sewer lines, and gorgeous frescoes. Clearly no slouch on the aesthetics, but most impressive was the pure scale of the place. The large central courtyard was surrounded by hundreds of rooms for all manner of different purposes, going beyond the typical administrative offices.
Yeah, I think I saw that in game Odyssey, right? This palace is in there.
Private residences to include religious spaces, extensive warehouses, artisan workshops, and something approximating a marketplace. Those last three might seem a bit out of place in a royal abode, no matter how ginormous, but they imply a unique structure to the Minoan economy. If the palaces could stock a kingdom's worth of supplies ranging from local Cretan produce kept fresh in cold underground ceramics all the way to overseas luxury items, it's likely these compounds served as mass redistribution hubs, taking in everything and doling it back out as needed. Imagine a farmer bringing in jars of olive oil and exchanging it for fish, some wine, and a new cup made by an artisan in the palace. Call me old-fashioned, but I kinda think they nailed it on this one. It's a system that would require immense organization organization by the governing bureaucracy, but we have extensive tables of what look like storage records, so when it works, it works.
Yeah.
Coordination on this monumental of a scale was new to Europe, but it looks as though it took inspiration from the palaces of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. And that's not all they took from the Near East, as the Minoans were stocked with gold, ivory, lapis lazuli, and scarab designs. So even for all the Minoan fanciness at home, they were still fundamentally a maritime culture. And the rest of the Aegean was very well aware of this, as they would have come into frequent and perhaps unwilling contact with their neighbors from Crete. Even without detailed written records, a broad Minoan influence is evident in the mountains of their pottery and goldwork found on the Greek mainland and all the way over to Anatolia. Much of that was spread through trade, but in the Cyclades it was far more direct, like on the miraculously well-preserved island of Thera, which was home to either an indigenous culture that really dug the Minoan vibe, or an outright Minoan colony. This seafaring supremacy approximates something Athens would become famous for 1,000 years down the line: maritime empire. Thucydides says as much when he cites King Minos as the first to have built a great navy, and this makes one key detail of the palace.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense that this could be a Minoan, because they would want to have an island that is closer to their main island, right? Crete, small islands, for defense purposes at least. They can't just have people raiding on their island unannounced. I guess they need certain posts. So island close to, Crete would have been theirs probably.
As much when he cites King Minos as the first to have built a great navy, and this makes one key detail of the palaces make a lot more sense. They don't have any walls. The mainland cities of the time had fortifications so thick they were said to be built by giants, but Crete had a 100-mile moat with boats for days, and that was all they needed. That also implies the Minoans weren't a threat to each other and probably worked as one big team. Now, although we can cobble together a decent understanding of macro-scale Minoan civilization from context clues, the details just leave us confused, because there's an incredible volume of art and pottery, sculpture, and beautiful frescoes, but ask 3 historians what on earth it might mean and you'll get 5 uncertain answers, with at least one historian crying. The prevalence of realistic-ish human figures carrying libations and processing clearly has something to do with religion, but beyond that, I don't know. There's also a reverence for the natural world, with particular emphasis on bulls, as stylized horns show up all over the roof of the palace, and one fresco depicts a gymnast leaping over a charging bull. Because sure, parkour is cool and all, but wake me up when the jungle gym starts fighting back. It's metal as hell, but it still doesn't tell us anything without other context. The Minoans did have written languages, but since we
they probably created a sport art, whatever, a festival around the bull. Sure, it can happen. That's what the case was, I guess. Parkour is a stretch, I guess. They were just doing some stunt there, sure.
Don't know how to read either of them, they're stuck as a silent culture, artfully expressing something that we can't figure out. The prevalence of ornately dressed women in Cretan art might suggest a more egalitarian or even matriarchal social order than we're used to seeing in classical Greece, as women take active roles in sacrifice and processions and are sometimes surrounded by male attendants. There's obviously some reason for this, but was it a religious thing, an outright political matriarchy, or blind chance leaving behind more frescoes of women than men? We have absolutely zero idea. Now, coincidentally, we're not alone in our confusion, because the classical Greeks also had no clue what the Minoans were up to. In fact, without modern archaeology, their only indication that there was anything happening on Crete at all in the Bronze Age was from the myth of King Minos and the Minotaur. Red's given the full rundown before, but the salient details are a kingdom with lots of boats, a big old labyrinth, and a terrifying bull monster. This fits surprisingly well into the historical reality of a maritime empire that built complex palaces and was obsessed with bulls. But the later Greeks wouldn't have known that, because Minoan civilization was long dead and buried by the time Athens started loudly bragging about their hometown hero Theseus slaying the Minotaur. So if the Minoans were so big and tough, why didn't they stick around? The most dramatic theory attributes their decline to the island of Thera, which used to be an oval until 1628 BC, when a volcano blew it to bits and sank into the sea, throwing a giant cloud of ash across the southeast Aegean. This does explain why the Minoan site on the island is preserved with positively Pompeian precision, and it left an absolutely gorgeous landscape for tourists to enjoy when they go visit Santorini, but it doesn't explain the Minoan collapse, as it's 2 centuries ahead of schedule. Plato likely drew on the distant memory of this explosion when he dreamed up the story of Atlantis, but it isn't our culprit. So let's go over what we do know about the Minoan chronology and see what we can figure out. The first palaces appeared sometime in the 1900s BC, with sites at Knossos, Phaistos, Zakros, Malia, Galatas, and Kydonia. After an earthquake in about 1700, the palaces were rebuilt with some added structural support, and over the next 2 centuries we see Minoan Minoan pottery make its way around the Aegean as outposts spring up from Thera to as far north as Kea. Then, around 1450, there's a break. Most of the palaces are destroyed, with Knossos surviving for another century before it's abandoned. Before 1450, records were kept in a language we call Linear A, which...
Yeah, but we do know that, during the, I guess, Bronze Age, all the civilizations like Mesopotamia and things like that collapsed because of many reasons. It could have been the same thing with this Minoan one, right? On Crete, because not just one reason, there could have been multiple reasons, right? Some disaster could have weakened them, then could have been invasion followed by that, right? Dominoes falls fast for empires. And that's not some coincidental thing. I mean, if somebody's trying to take over a certain empire, right, they would see that certain disaster or some disease ruined and weakened their empire. That is the best time to strike or something like that. So it could have been many things like that.
Strictly speaking, is not Greek. It's something else, but we don't know what, and that's why it's still undeciphered. Now, after 1450, the writing is in the same script, but recorded different spoken language. The script is called Linear B, the language is an early form of Greek, and the other place we see this script appear is on the mainland, as written by a people called the Mycenaeans. These guys are relative latecomers, but they're best known as the Achaeans of the Iliad who supposedly fought the Trojan War. So what are they doing on Crete? As it happened, they were in a lot of places, as an artistic survey of pottery in the 1300s BC shows the geometric Mycenaean style appearing all over the Minoans' old stomping grounds. So one way or another, it would seem like the Mycenaeans rolled up to Crete in the mid-1400s and either destroyed or deposed the Minoans, only to leave a century later. Without the palaces there to keep society running as it had been for the past several centuries, the entire civilization simply fizzled out and went back to local fishing and subsistence farming. Now, the wildest part is that the Athenians and the other classical Greeks actually knew about this, they just didn't realize it. The thing with the story of Theseus and the Minotaur is that it lets on more than it seems, because when we peer behind all the mythological window dressing, what we're left with is the distant, imprecise memory of the Minoan invasion of Crete. Not quite a bull monster, but tons of bovine art. Not quite an underground labyrinth, but a puzzlingly intricate palace complex. Not quite an annual tribute of 7 Athenian sacrifices, but... well, here's the thing. The Minoan outpost at Kea is within literal line of sight from the Athenian Cape Sunion where King Aegeus threw himself into the sea. And excavations on Crete turned up startling evidence of both human sacrifice and cannibalism. Mycenaean Athens may well have been a tributary to the Minoan Maritime Empire, and that's a fancy way to say a victim of constant piracy. If Athens has an ancient myth about sailing to Crete and killing a big awful bull monster to liberate themselves from tyranny, that's not very far off from the actual invasion of Mycenaean Greeks in the mid-1400s. So far more than local prince kills giant monster version 18b, the myth of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth is an account of an actual historical event that's been run through half a millennium of mythological telephone. And that, in my professional opinion, is sick as hell. It's some big-time irony that
that is awesome. I mean, obviously, every myth might have some kind of a realism towards it. This is a great example of that, right? Because sometimes history gets preserved in myths, right? Myths are obviously exaggerated, but you have to see it through, like what it really means.
a civilization whose words nobody else can read is best known through a story that nobody thought was real. Modern archaeologists can ponder the Minoans with the aid of incredible discoveries to try and understand what was going on in this stunningly vibrant culture, but the Greeks that came after the Bronze Age, who had infinitely less to go on, were just as captivated by them. The pure mystery of the palace without a voice and the monster in the labyrinth is so damn compelling. It is impressive how many seemingly fundamental aspects of Greek history trace back to the time before it was even Greek history. Terrifying. I love it. Thank you so
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so every myth, that's some kind of true, that, Zeus thing, right? Zeus just bangs people and just runs away type of myth. Even that, I think that was a real problem of, I guess, raping or something like that at that time. And people just, oh, it's the gods. Zeus did it, I guess. I don't know. So, yeah, I see every myth and I try to peel away and see some truth behind it. Like, is there any real world thing here, right? Because, every myth does have some kind of a realism behind it. If you don't know it, you have to, I guess, peel it more with more, I guess, historical records of the time. But, yeah, nobody can just, there might be some cases that people just, create something out of the blue, but it wouldn't become famous. It wouldn't become a myth, a folktale, right? Only way it would become if more people would believe it, right? And it has to come from some kind of a real source. Alright people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. Check out other reaction, there's a link in the description. Check out the cast for different playlists like OSP with all my OSP reactions. There are many of by now. I've been reacting to this channel for what, 8 months or something. I don't know, other players like Warmer 40k, John Tron, and yeah, I guess I'll see you next time.